Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. This time around we are on the map Red Desert, playing as the forces of Brettonia against the forces of the Empire. And this is one of those matchups that, in my opinion, is kind of a classic. You see it quite a lot. It might not necessarily be the one that jumps out as a loreful confrontation or anything along those lines, but it is a match that you do see a good amount of the time, and it's kind of one of those matches that has a lot of variety and what different players can bring. Of course, Empire can bring its demi-blobs, Empire can bring all sorts of nasty shooting, artillery, steam tanks, lines of state troops, big flying monsters. And Brettonia, in turn, can bring swarms of its own infantry, artillery, and cavalry. You really do see the full breadth of rosters utilized here. And so it can be a pretty fun, but also a bit of a challenging matchup. So going over my build here, it's something that's pretty classic for me. Rolling with the Fan Chancellors for my Lord, I think she's excellent here. Not super tanky or anything, but of course she does get you that Miss the Lady. In my opinion, it's important to grind down Empire infantry blobs if they go for a super infantry heavy build. She also does debuff enemy melee attack, which is nice. You get Life Bloom, you get Earth Blood, Shield of Thorns, which I think is nice for the synergy with the various Brettonian cavalry units, the Regiments of Renown, and of course Royal Hippogriff Knights, who get a massive boost out of it. They're already pretty beefy, they already get 20% physical resist, so getting an extra 22% on top of that is pretty huge. We also do have Arcane Conduit for the Winds of Magic. Favor of the Fae, beautiful single target buff, can really make a unit like Hippogriff Knights or Questing Knights just dish out insane amounts of hurt very, very quickly. And finally the Chalice of Potions, of course, for that area nukage. The rest of the build, frontline, is composed of some men-at-arms trash as well as peasant mob. I know a lot of Brettonian players will go much heavier on the infantry line, but against Empire, I figured this is good enough. Empire doesn't tend to tear out your infantry line super quickly. They're not generally very good at getting rid of them too fast. So just having a lot of trash that can bog down to the Empire state troops is very nice. We do have them backed up by 2 peasant bows with poison. These guys, of course, no longer debuff friendly troops, which makes them a lot more appealing. They're also a good zoning tool against something like Outriders or against Empire cavalry skirmishers, but even crossbows and guns, they can pressure a little bit. And they do give you a little bit of a range threat. Besides that, 2 contingents of Knights Errant as well as Questing Knights. On this end, we have some vanilla variant. Over here, we've got the 2 Regiments of Renown. I really do like these units. Knights Errant, very cheap, good for harassing backlines, shutting down cannons, artillery, also softening up charges against elite Empire cav. Questing Knights, an excellent tool that can really tear through units like Demigryph Knights. They will dish out hurt to any lower-end Empire cav. They'll just crush units like Reichsguard, Knights of the Bleeding Sun, and are still a major threat to Empire state troops and units like Questing Knights or lords like Karl Franz. Finally, 2 units of Royal Hippogriff Knights, who I think are amazing in this matchup. It's a unit I would definitely recommend. Immune to cannonball sniping, which is nice. It takes multiple cannonballs to kill a Royal Hippogriff Knight, even if it's the Hammer of Witches, which is really, really nifty against Empire, who will often try to scythe down your cavalry with artillery. You can see here we've got 1 unit deployed over on this flank just to scout out if my opponent has some Vanguard shenanigans on this end, and the other unit over here. But together, Royal Hippogriff Knights stacked on top of Questing Knights can just demolish units like Demigryphs very, very cost effectively. Now for my opponent, he has gone with a pretty standard Empire build. We've got Karl Franz up in the sky. He's a popular pick in this matchup, though probably not the guy I personally prefer. At least not on good old Deathclaw here, since it makes him a bit vulnerable to aerial goon squads. But Karl, very powerful with Hold the Line. Of course, he dishes out boatloads of damage, 490 weapon strength, that's AP. He's got Foe Seeker here, Stand Your Ground, which is going to be boosting all his troops up. Alongside the Reikland Runefang and Gul Miraz, he is just going to be an absolute menace and able to dish out insane amounts of damage to units like Royal Hippogriffs and, of course, Questing Knights. And with Blood Roar and his Terror, he's going to be able to rat off men-at-arms very quickly if my opponent so chooses. Besides that, some Outriders screening out here, looking to get some early game pot shots. Not a bad unit. I do think they're a little susceptible to Brettonian Heavy Cav because they only got 84 speed, and Brettonian Heavy Cav, if we look at Knights Errant, for example, they've got 75 speed. So if they hit their charge, they will actually catch Outriders, and it can be not fun, not a good time. But otherwise, they can do a lot of chip damage over time, and they can, of course, reposition, can be well microed. So Spearmen in the front here, looking to soak up the charge. Sigmar Sons, excellent choice against Brettonia. They can really deal with masses of low-end Brettonian trash troops. Very, very strong combat unit. More Spearmen at Arms. Keep in mind, Brettonian Cavalry doesn't tend to have the best armor. Most of it's in the 80 to 90 range. The Knights of the Realm actually sitting at, or Knights Errant, sorry, sitting at 75, I believe, on the base variant. If I could find it here. I'm not even able to find it. Kind of sad. But Knights Errant, they're sitting at, oh no, they've got 80 armor. But 80 armor for the Questing Knights and Knights of Errant, so nothing too impressive. And Spearmen can do some damage. Then some Hippogriff Knights in the back, including the Royal Griffiths. Great AP damage, very good against mobs of cavalry, especially decently armored cavalry. Mortars to break up my archers and men-at-arms chaff mobs. And a Lore of Life caster with Regrowth, Earthblood, and surprisingly Blast instead of Power Stone. I'd probably recommend Power Stone over Blast. I don't think this is very worthwhile, but you never know. Maybe get a little value out of it. Regardless, mortars are raining in on the poor peasant mob. Before switching target to the archers, I do see the incoming fire, so I'm actually going to be trying to dodge here. Mortars can be dodged, but the RNG can screw you a little bit. In this case, you can see one of them landed a square hit on the peasant bows. Fortunately, the Fae is nearby, providing our leadership aura, and it keeps these peasant cowards in the fight. In the meantime, the peasant mobs here are getting dumpstered. They're going to rout before they make contact, but I don't really care. It's a peasant mob. It's 100 gold. Congratulations. You routed off 100 gold with my army. In the meantime, though, the men-at-arms are going to be closing the gap here. They have, of course, got shields, so they can screen out those outriders really well. Now, these Demigryph Knights here are committing, trying to push back the peasant mob, but this is a little bit of a misplay, as they're now very much isolated. There's no infantry in position to help. These spearmen aren't trying to come up, but they're not close enough. And now the Companions of Canel are charging in. These guys, of course, brutal anti-large unit. They actually will beat Royal Griffiths in a straight head-to-head. So they're going to get the charge here on the Demigryph Knights with halberds before they can escape, catching this one guy back here. He's just having a straight up bad time. Carl does counterattack here, as do the Royal Griffiths. We can see just this massive blob fight coming down. The Knights of the Defenders of the Fleur de Lis coming down from on high. The Hippogriff Knights charging straight into the enemy Demigryph Knights. And of course, a horde of buffs and debuffs going down. As the Peasant Bowfire, those poison arrows, those pox arrows rain in on the Outriders, trying to zone them back. And so it's a bit of a brawl of cavalry here, and it is one that I'm pretty confident in winning. As we can see here, the Hippogriffs do dive in. They immediately dish out both sorts of hurt. My opponent drops all his buffs, which is very strong, and it's going to heal his blob pretty well. But in turn, I'm dropping Shield of Thorns, getting that 40%, 42% physical resist on the Hippogriff Knights, and on the Companions of Canel. We're getting an Earthblood in there as well, which is going to be healing this entire blob. My opponent's Royal Hippogriffs actually, or Royal Griffiths here, pulled back, and the Demigryph Knights are just getting dumpstered. They're just getting demolished here. In the meantime, we are going to drop a Comet of Cassandora from on high with Chalice Potions. Outriders are pouring in fire from the flanks. They've got a bit of surround here, but we're pulling in more infantry. My opponent doesn't have any infantry here. These spearmen are too far out of position, so my peasants are actually just compromising the blob. They're not doing a huge amount of damage, but they're stalling and they're disrupting some of these attacks. Comet of Cassandora coming in. Archers being routed by mortar fire, but on the flank here, I don't really care. Sigmar's Sons, sure, they broke the peasant mob. Sure, these guys are bogging me down. But over here, the Comet did do massive amounts of damage to Royal Griffiths. My opponent didn't dodge in time. He is able to bring one of the Hippogriffs down, but it's really just a brutal trade here. And these Demigryphs here rout, dropping to 10 models very, very quickly. 11 models, I guess. The Royal Griffiths are not able to hold, and Carl is now in a precarious position because he's getting surrounded, and my cavalry is breaching the line, just swarming over. Faye actually dives into the Outriders because she's fast enough. She can catch them. She's got 95 speed. She's on a unicorn. Silveron is very, very quick, and she's killing them about 3 at a time here. She's no pushover. Those Dragon Ball Z moves, exploding them on contact. In the meantime, the normal questing knights do pour in through the gap. Bit of a misplay here on my part. I sent these knights errant into the mortars thinking they could get in there, but my opponent was on top of his micro. He actually flexed his spears into position, blocked these guys off, and a bit of a slip up because these guys are getting mauled very badly. But in the meantime, the Outriders have been terror routed by proximity to some of the Hippogriff Knights. The Royal Griffiths are trying to help, and they're getting earth-blooded and everything, but despite that, we have breached the main cavalry contingent. Balance of power is starting to shift decisively in our favor. And although these Outriders may rally and they may try to help, at this point, things are just very grim for the Empire. They do have some spears pouring in, but it's a little late now. The cavalry contingent is swarming over. Royal Hippogriff Knights still on 6 and 5 models, so I can heal that almost to full. The men-at-arms swarming over, getting rid of the men-at-arms there. Now the Defenders of the Fleur de Lis storming back down. Companions of Canel trying to get in there on Carl, and although the Fae here is getting a little caught out, definitely not where she wants to be in life against Alto Griffiths, so she does send one flying, showing off that she is not quite some dainty lady after all. Definitely able to take care of herself, but she does manage to extricate herself, and the Hippogriffs are just crushing the Royal Griffiths. They don't stand a chance. It's just a brutal massacre here. More questing knights pouring into the fray. Carl by himself is not going to win this battle. There just aren't models left. These guys are down to 5 models. The Royal Hippogriffs are down to 1. He actually shatters, poor guy. Defenders of the Fleur de Lis pouring in after the Outriders, and they do have that 75 speed, so we're actually going to see them kind of catching up here. They catch a few of those models before the Outriders escape. And with that, my opponent, he is trying to chip me down from the flanks, but now the men-at-arms overrunning the back lines. The mortars not able to do enough damage. These Knights Errant over here rallying, so they're going to be able to pincer down onto the Outriders. Questing Knights pouring in. It's just an overwhelming force. While down here, the Royal Hippogriff Knights and the Companions of Canal swarm Carl. They will drag him into the muck. You can just see how much he's getting chunked here, losing 400 HP in his heartbeat there. And yes, these spearmen are going to get in here, are going to save their liege lord there, but it's just too little too late. Even if Carl does rally the stage, he's too close to his healing cap. Faye is going to hunt down this Jade Wizard who can't escape, and my opponent is forced to GG out. So, a bit of a fast-paced game where I think my opponent getting a little bit overextended definitely hurt him significantly. It's one of those things you got to be very wary of in what's a very fast-paced matchup. Empire can take the Cav game, certainly, and I think in this situation, my opponent definitely had at least some of the tools he needed. Had he taken a fight atop his Spearman line, I think he would have been in a much better position, because ultimately, those Spearmen would have been making a difference, even against Hippogriffs. Hippogriffs only have 90 armor, so they're not the tankiest unit ever. So just having some Spearmen mixed into the fray there, softening the blow on your Demigriffs, while Carl dishes out the hurt and is providing all those buffs, and then you got buffs from the Jade Wizard, I think it puts you in a very strong spot. I do think there was a little bit of a slip up with the Outriders. The Outriders were just not getting the DPS they really needed to get, I think. Obviously, there was a little bit of a slip up early on with the Demigriffs, which let them get isolated, and the one unit got pounded on pretty hard by the Companions and the double Hippogriffs before they really managed to get anywhere. And that was just brutal. You don't want to take a separate engagement with Empire, at least not with a Demi-Blob, in my opinion. And I think that really hurt my opponent here. But at the same time, for Brettonia, I do think this sort of heavy Cav play is very potent. Now, there are alternative builds. You can go with a very Trebuchet heavy build, just try to out-artillery Empire. You can actually route Empire artillery crews off with Trebuchets, with Blessed Field Trebuchets, especially with a few Chevrons. You can certainly go for alternate Cav builds. You can go for cheaper and lighter Cav, and I know some players are fond of that. I'm personally not. I like going with Questing Knights and Hippogriff Knights, but it's certainly a valid option. But you could go for something that's lots of infantry with just a few cheaper Cav in there, and it can work rather well. But what I really like is this mob of dirt cheap chaff, and then backing up with these troops. Royal Hippogriff Knights, Wombo comboed with Questing Knights, perform excellently. It does cost a lot. This is about 3,000 for just the, or 3,100 for just the unit of Questing Knights and Hippogriffs. So that's an insane amount of investment. But you probably can take on 2 units of Demigriffs if you set up your charges correctly. And then throw in some buffing from the Fey Enchantress, and the fact that you can really blob the 2 Hippogriffs into a fight. You get so much damage in a condensed area, and you have a very potent strike force. And the Questing Knights give you a little bit of zonage against units like Outriders, a little bit of backline harass, something for your opponent to worry about, and I think it's all in all a nice build to use. For my opponent, I do think you could have probably cut down one of the mortars here. You probably don't need 2. Obviously, it's a little easier to route Peasant Bows if you've got 2 of them, and if your opponent isn't trying to dodge intentionally, it can be a little easier to do. In this situation, I was not on top of my dodging micro. Some better players are very much capable of dodging mortar shots, but while microing a major battle. But I was not able to do that here, so unfortunately the Peasant Bows did route off after popping a few shots at the enemy Cav. But it's something you want to be wary of, and I think it makes it so it's not really worth bringing more than 1 mortar as Empire. It's something used to force Brettonia to dance. Though obviously on a map like this one, like Red Desert, there is the benefit of being able to fire over bad terrain. Besides that, the Spear Line, not a bad idea. Obviously solid against Brettonia. Demigriff Knights, not bad. Outriders, I think, are a little tough to defend. Because you got Demigriffs, you got Carl, but you don't have any other cavalry, really. So with a force like this, or cheaper cav force, you'll oftentimes find that your Demigriffs are stuck in one pocket of a fight, and then your Outriders are just being forced to Benny Hill around the map while being pursued by enemy cav. And if it's a unit like Knights Errant, it's actually a cost-effective trade for your opponent. Your opponent is keeping your shooting out of the fight in exchange for a cheap cav. Which, yeah, it costs the same, but ultimately I'd say it's probably worthwhile for the Brettonian just to keep your guns out of the fight. Since that's probably one of your main sources of damage output. And chances are Knights Errant are not one of their primary sources of damage output against anything besides missiles. So, and plus, Outriders can get caught. So I'm not a huge fan of Outriders in this matchup just because they're a little squishy and unforgiving, but certainly they can do some work. And I do think they did at least a little bit here to the Hippogriffs. I just think the defense needs to be a little more on point. I think the main thing was you need more synergy with your spears and your demigriffs. They need to be on top of each other. They need to be fighting together. And they can't be fighting alone, isolated from each other, because then Brettonia can just pick you apart with their cat mob. But regardless, well played to sell here. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you had fun watching some Brettonia Empire action. As usual, leave your thoughts, opinions, comments, and critiques down below. Feel free to drop the like, subscribe, share, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.